Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible, going into Numbers 22. And today we are opening with a special presentation from Milwaukee Atheists. Lawrence?
Damn right. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much. I wanted to have this presentation ready because there's a very important piece of biblical history that needs to be discussed in order to get a fuller context of the Balaam text. So,
Mm.
if you wouldn't mind, Peter, we can start with the slides. Yes. Obviously, as you can see, this presentation was done by me. Thank you, me, so much. And you should absolutely do exactly what it says right there in the subtitle. So, let's move on to the official first slide. All right. So, the Balaam pericope. So we're talking about Balaam, the son of Beor at Pethor. So that's the city he's in. And the Moabite king Balak wants to. He sees the Israelites coming, and he's all like, you know what? I don't really like these guys. I want Balaam, this prophet essentially, to speak ill against them. So he basically hires them, and Balaam speaks to God or Yahweh
Mhm.
in the night, and God doesn't allow him to curse the Israelites. And then the messengers that Balak sent were sent away. But Balak sends more messengers, more people. And God finally allows him to go. And he's like, okay, you can go, but make sure you only say what I tell you to say. If it's not my words, don't pronounce them. Uh, weirdly enough, on his way over, God is pretty mad that he went, so he sends an angel. And I have a typo there. Oops. So he sends an angel, and this is where we get the donkey story.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we can go to the next slide.
Because God is consistent and never changes his mind.
No, never at all.
Eh,
So this angel only appears to the donkey first of all, and he blocks the donkey's path. And Balaam, he's like, "Why the fuck aren't you moving, you stupid donkey?" So he starts hitting the donkey, and then eventually the donkey starts talking to him, and he's like, "Hey, why are you hitting me? I've never done anything to you. Basically, have I ever strayed from your rules, I guess, from what you wanted me to do?" And he's like, "No, no, you haven't." But then the angel finally reveals himself and tells him to go and pronounce God's oracle. So, so Balak takes him to Bamidbar to pronounce judgment. So that's this first area. Balaam sets up some altars. He gets revelation from Yahweh, and Balaam's like, you know what? No, I can really only bless Israel here. Balak's like, all right, fine. What about if we do it somewhere else? So they go to a different place. And shocker, he blesses Israel again. And Balak is like, you know what? Third time's the charm. Let's try again at Peor. So they go to Peor. We can go to the next slide. And he blesses Israel again. So importantly, he says he hears El's utterances and sees the visions of Shaddai. Uh, and then he pronounces doom on Balak. And the reason I wanted to actually cover the story before we read the story is because I want to cover the importance of El's utterances and the visions of Shaddai. So we can go into the next slide here. All right, so the Balaam pericope in early scholarship. So it was initially thought that this is a JE source. So we have both the Yahwist and the Elohist because it uses both Yahweh and Elohim. But textual traditions actually vary on this. They change the names sometimes. The Septuagint and the Samaritan text, as well as the Vulgate, even. Uh, they sometimes change the names for God. So in one version where you see Elohim, it could be Yahweh in another version. Or if it says Yahweh in one version, it could be Elohim in another version. And this is maintained in many textual traditions. There's a doublet in 22, 3a, and 3b. So essentially, like the verse, splitting in half. And that has that, along with some other interesting things to note that we will get into, have essentially been like a baseline for, well, this is from two different strands. Something was combined here, but something still didn't seem quite right. Like, first of all, like Balaam is punished for going, even though he was explicitly told by God to go. Why would he show up? Like, the donkey story makes it seem like he was a disobedient prophet, when in no sense do we get the feeling that he was disobedient at all. Uh, so there was some that hypothesized, well, El or Elohim was used in the narrative portion, which is fair, and Yahweh was only used in the oracles, so when he was receiving revelation. Comparisons with the story were made to Mesopotamian diviners and Sumero-Akkadian mantic texts. Noth, he did believe that the story was a JE composition, and he was like, well, I think that Balaam was probably like a foreigner that accepted Yahweh. That was his idea. And there were other people in kind of the early critical scholarship days that had their own thoughts on these. So Albright, for example, he thought that the story was from the 13th or 12th century BCE. DeVoe thought that it was from the United Monarchy, so that would have been from the period of David and Solomon. There is it could be or it was suggested that in 23:7, where Balaam says he was called from Aram, that this story had an independent Syrian origin. The tradition of Balaam and Balak is also seen in Micah 6:5, but it is important to note here that only the first 3 chapters of Micah are generally seen as authentic. The rest is at a later period. Some scholars have suggested that the Balaam stories would have independently circulated. And DeVoe actually believed Balaam was a familiar figure in the Transjordan. Now, that was in 1964 when he said that. And then, let's get into the next slide here. The Dear Allah texts. 3 years after DeVoe said that, he was essentially vindicated. Because so it's an area in the Transjordan, and there was this very important fragment that was found. It was like up on a wall, or it would have been up on a wall, right? So the place itself, the actual complex, was destroyed by an earthquake, and we can go in about 800 BCE. So we can go to the next slide here. So this is the Deir Allah complex, and that room in that circle is where we find the Deir Allah texts, and I believe they're on the west wall. That's where their original placement would have been. So if we can go to the next slide. This is, I think this might be from, I forget which combination this is from. There are 2 portions that I'll talk about. There's combination 1 and 2. And it's unclear if they weren't to go together, but I'll get into that. But this is just one of the pictures I could find from it. So we can go on to the next slide. All right. So yeah, combinations 1 and 2. So this is essentially, we have 2 texts that are broken up, and it's unclear if they actually belong together. Levine argues for a relation on the basis of a disqualified counselor, which is kind of hinted at in combination 2. And he also finds a lot of links with Isaiah 14. So some of the text is actually in red and kind of looks like it served as like bookends, I guess, except you'd still have in addition almost. So like the first like line or 2, that's in red, and then like the last ones are in red, but I believe they might be followed by some more. But the actual, and then they have like a red border as well. And like this whole practice is very weird because we haven't seen manuscripts quite like that. So it's very unclear as to what that practice even meant in the ancient world. So we can go on to the next slide. So this is from the Whitebird translation. So Baruch Levine has his own translation, but it is mostly, or a good chunk of it, I should say, is based on very detailed arguments that he has made over the years. So the text might not directly say that. It might just have like, hints here and there, and he just reconstructs it in a way that would make sense. But I wanted to go with a more kind of bare bones translation. So if we go into this, if you just don't mind me reading it here, uh, this is the book of Balaam, son of Beor, a seer of the gods. And to that man came the gods at night, and they spoke to him according to the utterance of El. And they spoke to Balaam, son of Beor, thus. And there are some, as you can see, some textual breaks here. Balaam arose in the morning. He was not able to eat, and he fasted while he was weeping grievously. And his people came to him, and they said to Balaam, son of Beor, why do you fast, and why do you weep? And he said to them, sit down. I shall tell you what the Shadayin are. So it might be what are saying, but there are some reconstructions, but we know it's a participle. Now come, see what the gods are about to do. The gods gathered while Shaddai deities met in assembly and said to Shamash, we can go to the next slide here. Thou mayest break the bolts of heaven, which, by the way, Levine has a very good reconstruction of this that I actually think is better. He says that this would be about sewing up the vault of heaven, and he actually links that to the passages in the Bible that kind of treat the heavens as a tent, right? He kind of uses that cloth analogy to be like, okay, well, if it says that they are in fact sewing it up, that actually makes a lot of sense with other ancient Near Eastern texts. So in the bolts of heaven, in thy clouds, let there be gloominess and no brilliance, darkness and not thy radiance. Thou mayest cause terror by the gloomy clouds, but do not be angry forever. For the swift is reproaching the eagle, and the vultures brood the ostrich. There are a lot of birds in this section, by the way, and as is tradition, they are not exactly identifiable in all cases. The stork is doing something to the young of the hawk and the owl, the chicks of the heron. The swallow is doing something to the dove, and the sparrow, textual break. And then I'm not going to read this next part because there are a lot of textual breaks, but there are references to hyenas, and this part is essentially about the role reversal in society. Like where it says like the poor woman is preparing an ointment of myrrh. Some of the reconstructions by at least Levine suggest that the idea of that, and then the deaf are hearing from afar, like things that these people or animals should not be doing are now doing them. So we can hop to the next slide here. Kind of the importance of these. So Elohim and Shaddai are of course both mentioned here. As I mentioned in the beginning of this, both of them appear in the text. You have the utterances of El and the visions of Shaddai. Shaddai is, of course, a title that is used for God in the biblical text. There has been some discussion on perhaps its Egyptian origin in recent years, but from what it seems like in the text is what we're dealing with is a council of gods, and it's likely that would have, of course, been an origin for the text that we get in Numbers. There's the link of the gods coming to Balaam in the night. We have a rising in the morning. The birds, for example, and the way that they are talked about. Also, some of the other animals. These are features of omen literature, which, if we compare that to Numbers, yeah, no shit, omen literature. You're literally hiring a guy to curse at people. Oh, and of course, the biggest parallel: Balaam, son of Beor, is mentioned. So it's the same character. So let's go on to the next slide. All right, so it's really important to understand the actual place of Deir Allah. So it seems to have been some kind of small industrial hub. There are a bunch of looms. There's a baking and cooking area, grinding stones. It seems to have also been a place for trade. There were jars of the same type and in the same strata have been found in cities like Pella. Herbs and jugs from the Phoenician coast were also found in this place. So it's very clear this was a place of trade. And it seems like it would have been a semi-busy place because they had so many looms. So the area was probably under Aramean Damascene control at the time, but Israel under Jeroboam II may have actually taken it back for a period of time, at least according to Amos 6. And it's not entirely consistent with Deuteronomy 23, 5-6, where the land, Pethor, is said to be in Aram Naharain, which was actually further east. So the idea is that at the time that the section was written, this would have been an entirely different, not an entirely different area, but the section that they would have related to would have not been the initial one that would have been under this control. The ones at Deir Allah, I should say, but the general Aram area. The language, for example, is debated. It seems to be closest to Aramaic, but it's been suggested that it could be Canaanite, Moabite, Hebrew, Edomite. It's a whole bunch of possibilities. To me, because the thing is, they're writing in both common language and what's called high poetry. So they're essentially taking from both, like, here's common vernacular that you don't usually find in like some high-minded text, but then they're also taking high-minded stuff and putting it into the text. And what to me that shows that it's a quickly developing language. So you know what, if you want to put it in more modern terms, it is the missing link. And to me, this speaks of if you have a whole bunch of people going in and out of this area, passing by, buying stuff, selling stuff, you get to have this very quickly developing language because you're basically on the border between two linguistic groups. So it does seem to be the closest to Aramaic, however. And it may have been written by early Israelites in the 9th century, but that's still unclear. So we can go to the next slide. So because Tomer mentioned something about liking paleography, I decided to include these. So on the left, you will see the Arslan Tash amulets, which are from the 7th century BC. So that's much
Which
closer.
I mentioned them before.
Yeah. So they actually include a mention of Lilith, for example. So these amulets share. These are the closest we have to the text of Deir Allah in terms of actual language. But on the right side, you'll see other the Deir Allah texts compared to other ostraca in the area. But the ostraca that I have shown here are from around the 500s. So we can go to the you can kind of see the comparison of all the letters there. So we can go to the next slide. All right. So this is at least what I could gather from this. This is kind of my reconstruction of events. So there was probably a polytheistic prophet in the 9th century that gained some amount of fame. His story and prophecy may have been sold or traded, and it's unclear how many copies there were, if any, of the Deir Allah texts. But the story was probably repurposed for Israel in the 6th century BC. So they took this known story of this prophet in that area and repurposed it for their own usage. And then the last slide that we can get to is just my sources. That last one is the Deir Allah text reevaluated. That is an anthology work. So there's a whole bunch of papers, many of which are in French. And if you guys are interested in reading that, I can post the PDF to the Discord. So that is my short introduction.
That was fascinating, Lawrence. I apologize. I thought I was on mute this whole time. I hope I didn't make any background noise. It was interesting to me that P-Town wasn't here for this presentation. There was so much selective listening that would be required if he had heard that presentation.
Right, exactly.
I was literally about to say this was such an informative presentation that P-Town would have had to zone out for the entire thing.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
And no doubt he would have. But it's very interesting. I can see still the argument for the two threads if potentially there were two versions of this story running around, one where he had been disobedient and taken the money to go and do his prophetic work, and one where he listened to God and stuff like that. It's interesting to postulate, but I mean, I'm glad to know too that the predictions of scholars can be vindicated by actual evidence. It's
Yeah, that's
almost
pretty great.
like that's reliable if you're able to find things that verify after you make the prediction.
Right. Yeah. It's really incredible. Like, because DeVoe, I mean, it was kind of, he said it was a prophet in the Transjordan. Like, that's not exactly the biggest leap from the biblical text, but
No.
like, it's not the most specific kind of claim. But at least he was, partially vindicated. And the when at least to me, when I talk about truth in the Bible, like this is where you have like the grain of truth that we have the myth being built on top of it.
Mhm.
So
Totally.
we have archaeological evidence for a guy named Balaam, son of Beor, like
Who was a
there is
prophet
right in
who
that
stole
area.
prophecy and presumably cursing as well, which
Right.
I assume that's what your magic man does. He
But
buy
to
a
which
blessed
God?
Exactly.
With
The different gods. So the thing is, this well-known story was adapted and repurposed. So that was I wanted to do the presentation on the Dear Allah text because I didn't want to throw it at the end, because by the end we would have talked about it all. But at the beginning, even though I would have had to kind of talk about the story itself for it to make sense, I had to put it in its proper historical context. So
No, fair
just
enough.
one more time to speak on on behalf of those who are not here. But that's just like according to scholars
yeah.
and facts.
Oh, no.
And
Men, because remember, scholars are just human, and the magic god book of zoning into my brain is far more reliable.
yeah, well, you just like believe in evidence and stuff, and
Yeah, sorry.
and I just would rather talk about Jesus.
Yeah,
Is
that's just the
Jesus-
one thing in churches that they always hammer into you. It's man, it's of the world. You got to ignore that. It's like, this is not a glass. If that Bible says it's not a glass, that's what gets hammered into your brain when you're in these when you go to church.
My best friend in high school became an ordained Southern Baptist minister and the principal of a Christian school, wherein they
Condolences.
taught that the Bible is the only source of truth in our world. Let all else be a lie. And he had that in a plaque on his office.
That's a famous hymn. Let God be true and every man a liar.
Yeah.
Or actually, is that a scripture? I'm sure a hymn was made out of it. Whatever. That's what
I
do.
was
drink and
impressed
I quote
that my friend took the perspective that reality is a lie and only the book of lies is true. All right, so do we even need to bother reading this one?
I think we should.
Come on! How are we going to get all the talking out of your ass jokes?
I mean, I have commentary as well, so.
Indeed.
Oh, actually, I had a question for Lorence on his commentary specifically, although it will obviously come up. It said that Balaam was a prophet using the terms El and Shaddai, and we've already discussed how, at least at some points, El was different from Yahweh, and Balaam may have worked with half a dozen gods. Who knows? It was his job to work with gods and make their magic happen for the right price. But is Shaddai, I have heard, is Shaddai a god, or is it, as I have heard from somewhat less reliable sources, a religious term frequently used with El that does not delineate a different deity, but rather an aspect of the deity?
Well, Shaddai was probably a title used for a group of gods. So in the Dear Allah text,
like
it
murder
is
of crows.
It is, yeah. So it is unclear if God is, or if Balaam is supposed to send an oracle against like the enemies of I think it was Ishtar, or if he was, because the thing is, it's translated two different ways, or it could be translated two different ways. So he's like, so hear my admonitions against these, against the enemies of Ishtar, or hear my admonitions, enemies of Ishtar. So it's unclear exactly what the purpose of the text is. And Levine argues for one, and then other scholars argue for the other one. But so that I'm not really in a place to make an informed decision on that because I don't know Aramaic or this form of it.
From that
But-
perspective, there might not have been the same differences we see in analyzing the text. I mean, concepts were not the same. So
Yeah.
it's, I just know that in Christianity, when we were given the poster with all the names of God, El Shaddai, there was that Amy Grant song. It was supposed to be sort of a descriptor, like El Roy is King of Kings and whatnot.
Elroy?
It was later taken to kind of be like, oh, just another divine epithet. But the thing is that divine epithet has origins in polytheism.
That's what I want to understand,
Yeah.
because I know that, I mean, even in the earlier versions of Abraham, we were discussing that he was calling El Shaddai. Shaddai was the descriptor of his relationship to El, which, he was forming a special bond with this specific God, not that the other gods didn't exist, but that they were going to be buddy-buddy. And, fine, fair enough. But it's sort of, I'm kind of wondering where this usage falls in the path of the origins. And it's interesting because admittedly, there's always a little bit of speculation going on, but it's,
Yeah, while you guys fight over who's going to read today, I'm going to read a couple of comments.
I'll read.
Matt White says, Lilith liberated. What's the difference between prophecy and spoilers?
Spoilers are more often accurate. They are actually similar in some ways. Both are written after the event, if they are in any way accurate. Spoilers are also more precise. Prophecies, especially if they're meant to be written in advance, are things like, there will be wars and rumors of wars or shit that happens every day, like, yeah, congratulations. There was never world peace. Good job. You're very smart.
Yeah.
Daddy's proud.
You could also ask Paul Heyman that question, and he'd be like, that's not a prediction, that's a spoiler. Because Paul Heyman is the best talker in modern wrestling history.
Aaron, speaking about spoilers and prophecies, I do have, I don't know whether it's a spoiler or a prophecy. I made a picture this week, which I think we should make in reality as well. And I want to share that with everyone. There we go.
Oh my
Yes!
god!
Let's
We need
go.
this!
Wow! Wow! That's great.
People in chat have been asking. I think we should set it up so they
We
can
really
actually
should.
get that.
Wow!
We really should. I don't have a t-shirt store to set it up in, but if somebody here has to, we have to make it happen. Tomer must live forever in t-shirt form, and we should all get one and wear them on the same day.
All right, the next comment to read from is Say10616, who offers 25 RON?
Romanian lei.
Romanian lei, okay. And says, thanks for that very informative presentation. Wished things like that were taught in my school in the classes on religion. Yes, I agree.
Yes.
Yeah, hopefully I can, at least get to the point of being a professor one day, and then actually teach stuff in a clear-minded way where we don't have to, beat around the bush. We can just get to it. So,
Well, knowledge is the enemy of faith.
All right, then. Who's reading?
I'll read if you want. Chapter 22.
Oi.
Read
Okay.
up to 20 because that's 40 verses long. This chapter.
Oh.
Sorry, say
21.
again.
Read up to 20.
Read up to 20. Okay.
Yeah, that's up
Then
to
the
and
son-
including 20, right?
Including 20.
Including
Yeah.
20, yep. Then the sons of Israel journeyed and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan opposite Jericho. Now Balak, the son of Zippor, saw that Israel had come down to the Amorites. So Moab was in great fear because of the people, for they were numerous, and Moab was in dread of the sons of Israel. Moab said to the elders of Midian, Now this horde will lick us all up. That is all around us.
I hate when a horde licks you all wrong.
Kinky.
As the ox licks up the grass of the field. And Balak, the son of Zippor, said to the king of Moab at that time. So he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, Behold, a people came out of Egypt. Behold, they cover the surface of the land, and they are living opposite me. Now, therefore, please come, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I may be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that whom you bless is blessed, and whom you curse is cursed. So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination in their hands. And they came to Balaam and repeated Balak's words to him. He said to them, Spend the night here, and I will bring you word back to you as the Lord may speak to me. And the leaders of Moab stayed with Balaam. Then God came to Balaam and said, Who are these men with you? Balaam said to God, Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent word to me. Behold, there is a people who came out of Egypt, and they cover the surface of the land. Now come, curse them for me. Perhaps I may be able to fight against them and drive them out. God said to Balaam, Do not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. So Balaam arose in the morning and said to Balak's leaders, Go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. The leaders of Moab arose and went to Balak and said, Balaam refuses to come with us. Then Balak again sent leaders more numerous and more distinguished than the former. They came to Balaam and said to him, Thus says Balak, the son of Zippor, let nothing, I beg you, hinder you from coming to me, for I will indeed honor you richly, and I will do whatever you say to me. Please come then, curse the people for me. Balaam replied, The servants of Balak, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything, either small or great, contrary to the command of the Lord my God. Now, please, you also stay here tonight, and I will find out what else the Lord will speak to me. God came to Balaam at night and said to him, If the men have come to call you, rise up and go with them, but only with word which I speak to you shall you do.
Sounds like Balak thought Balaam was using hard bargaining tactics. No, I couldn't. Hey, I'll double your fee. Yeah.
Before Isaac will read my commentary, I wanted to mention that I've added to my bibliography for the Numbers and in the future for Deuteronomy, ancient Christian commentary on Scripture, which is a collection of early Christian commentators about about the Bible, and I've already cited some in the previous stream, and I've asked Colin to include that citation in my bibliography.
It's in there.
It's
Yeah,
a very interesting series of books. Yeah, it's really literally just a compilation of what different early church early church commentators were thinking at the time. Like, and it gives you a really good contrast as to how far things had changed in the period. So I think it's a very interesting look. I used I took some commentary from the one from their version on their edition on Job for the flat Earth stuff that I'm doing in the Bible. So
Awesome. I have to say, one of the things that it's very interesting and also a little bit absurd and disturbing when you listen to people who are making arguments, usually that they stole from a shitty apologist for God. They're completely unaware of the history of their own apologetic and the history of their own doctrine. And so they will insist on things that are the diametric opposite of what was the reason for God 300 years ago or 200 years ago. You know, the idea that naturalism proves God when so many rivers of blood were spilled over, you know, how it's not possible that the world could continue by rules. It has to be under the direct line of providence. Otherwise, why would we be praying? And so forth. So it's interesting to follow the history for several reasons. Among them, to notice how uninformed you have to be of it to hold certain opinions and to make certain arguments. And it's I always find that a bit disturbing in retrospect.
Yeah, do you
So-
want to start, Isaac? Or...
Oh yeah, I'll start. I just want to say that I've got a little bit of a cold coming on, and I've got a little bit of a cough. So
Oh,
if I do that,
Well, fortunately, you're not going to communicate that to any of us.
It's
yes,
true. We're social distancing.
I can cough all over the screen and nothing will happen. But I
I'm
still
sure you'll be
won't.
better than I was the time I came on with a cold.
All right, so verse 2, Milgram comments, as Abravanel has noted, there is an abrupt change of subject from Balak to Moab in verses 2 and 3, with the identification of the connection between the two postponed to verse 4. The problem can be resolved by regarding verse 2 as an editorial link that ties the following Balaam story with the preceding narrative on the conquest of the Amorites. That a personified Moab speaks in verse 4a, rather than Balak, indicates that the latter has not yet been introduced.
Yeah, and that was very indicative of this just being a later, this entire story just being a later insertion, which gave scholars the idea that this probably circulated on its own, which was, as we discussed with the Deir Allah text, kind of basically vindicated.
Okay, verse 4. A tradition given by Josephus in Antiquities 4, 100 to 102, and Chazal in the Talmud Sanhedrin 105a, tells that the Moabites and the Midianites formed an alliance against the Israelites. Targums Pseudo-Jonathan gives a different tradition, that Balak was a Midianite, and that Moab and Midian formed a united kingdom. Verse 5. Balaam, son of Beor. Milgram comments, the animosity of the tradition towards Balaam is revealed by the many explanations proposed for his name. 1. A mad people. Philo in Cherubim 22. And 2. He went out of his mind because of the immensity of his knowledge. Targums Pseudo-Jonathan. 3. He who swallows up the people.
Targums Pseudo-Jonathan as well.
Yeah. And 4, a corrupter of the people, from the Sanhedrin 105a. 5, his son is a beast, from the same tractate of the Talmud. The Deir Allah inscription featured a seer by the name Bilam, the son of Beor. Very good. We just spoke about that. In same verse, in his native land, the Hebrew Bible reads, "The land of the children of his people." Compare the King James version. The Vulgate, Peshitta, and Samaritan texts read Ammon, adding the letter Nun to the Hebrew Amoy. So the Amo is his nation. Ammon is just the same word with a Nun at the end. Licht, however, objects to this since it contradicts the other data. Abraham Shalom Yehuda proposed to read land of Amal, with Amal being a place located in northern Mesopotamia. Ashley supports this rendition, while Milgram writes that this reading is disputed. Ashley also adds the opinion of A.
Nulzich.
Nordsich that the consonants refer to a North Syrian deity named Amu/Amu.
Yeah,
So if this
2 double rooms.
Yeah. And so if this is the case, then Balaam lived in the land of the god Amu and worshipped him. Verse 7.
It's hard to tell sometimes. Oh, sorry. There was a delay. It's hard to tell sometimes the difference between the name of a deity and the name of a place, because a lot of places were named after their deities. So
True.
Yeah.
Also, when I when I'm reading the commentary, I can't see the screen. So if you make like a visual symbol to me you want to say something, I probably won't see it. So just.
No, I'm sorry. I just like I said, there was a little glitch and delay in my screen.
Yeah.
It happens.
That's fine. Verse 7, taking with them the fee for divination. The Hebrew Bible reads uksamim biyadam, with divination in their hands. Rashi, Nachmanides, and Sforno read with tools of divination, and Milgram objects to it since it's unlikely that Balaam would have need of their divinatory methods. Philo, in Life of Moses 1:266, Jonathan, Levine, and Ashley read with fees of divination, with Ashley noting that many scholars agree that samim can mean both divination and fees, just like the word bashora, both means good news in 2 Samuel 18:20, and wages paid to the bearer of good news in 2 Samuel 4:10. He further writes, although the Old Testament clearly condemns divination itself, collecting a fee for similar work seems to have been accepted by those who practiced it. Fees were collected by such men as Samuel in 1 Samuel 9:7-8, Ahijah,
Achia, I think.
Achia in 1 Kings 14:3, and Elijah in 2 Kings 8:8-9. Such men as Amos, in Amos 7:12, did not look positively on such fees, but that attitude appears to have developed only later in certain prophetic circles. This fee may.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll
just finish one line.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, this fee may be looked on as a consultation fee paid in advance of any cursing or blessing done by the seer.
It's possible that divination in this context is a bit like magic in the modern Christian context. Magic is evil and we must never do magic and we must never have anything to do with anything that is magic. But when we anoint our houses with oil in magic symbols and speak, blessings and curses and hedges of protection over ourselves, that's not an invocation or magic or a spell in any way, even though it obviously totally is. I was actually observing, particularly with the point of divination here, the similarity to Joseph and the stories of Joseph, because he was said to have a cup of divination, but he also, and in the later Daniel stories, there's the trope of meeting with God and receiving messages from God in sleep, that dreams, sacred dreams, prophecies, and communications with God happen in sleep. But that isn't a universal trope in the Bible. It doesn't say anything about sleep when Abraham is talking to God, for example. Although there's lots of killing things, so who knows. On
the issue of magic, I need to bring something up because this is kind of interesting. Where I am right now, and I don't know that any prophet or magician ever prophesied this sort of thing, but it's in the middle of the afternoon, should be a bright sunny day, and for the most part it is, except that it's suddenly shady with no clouds in the sky. Isn't that strange? Because I'm in the path of a 90% solar eclipse.
Oh,
nice.
It's very cloudy.
That's going on right now, and so that's causing some weird ass effects outside.
I can't see my sun. It's covered by the clouds, which is too bad because I would love to see an eclipse again.
Yeah, we will be in the path of totality next year. But it's interesting that we have the 90% thing. So our sun is just a sliver, and it's creating this weird effect of like that of refracted in all of the leaves of the trees. You get this weird shadow that causes this little crescent, what looks like a crescent moon, lit up all over my driveway. There's just hundreds of them. There's these little, and it's the strangest thing. But anyway, I just wanted to share that because how often do you have a solar eclipse going on? Like during the show?
Not often.
Yep.
You can bring that up with the flat earther Mormon.
Yeah.
I think it's
obviously or maybe just he's on a mountain cursing Aaron with the talking ass.
All right.
That's what we're here
do
for.
continue, please.
Yes. Verse 8. I will report back to you with the answer the Lord gives me. Levine comments, why would a non-Israelite seer or diviner require the permission or await the instructions of the God of Israel? Was Balaam the obedient servant of the God of Israel? And did he decide to obey? Obey? Or was he coerced by the power of Israel's God who compelled him to obey? Further on in Numbers 22:18, Balaam actually identifies himself as a devotee of the God of Israel by referring to Yahweh, my Yehovah Elohai, Yahweh, my God. Did Balaam's relationship to the God of Israel develop in the course of the narrative? Are we being told further that if the efficacy of magic was controlled by the God of Israel? Suffice it to say that the narrator, without explanation, has Balaam awaiting instruction from the God of Israel, unable to act on his own or on any other authority.
And
Yeah, I mean,
it's one of those things you have to find a bajillion explanations for if you don't accept that this is a modified and adapted text.
yeah,
If
I
you
think
just
the
take
Jewish
it as
tradition is. I think the Jewish tradition is that, like, since he was an actual prophet, he did follow the God of Israel, but he didn't necessarily call it the God of Israel. He calls it Yehovah, my God. So he calls it by the same name, but he sees it as his God, not just the God of Israel, I guess.
a bit like Melchizedek, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe. I think, yes, I think he's considered one of the, like, I don't know where it talks about, but it says, like, oh, there was a certain number of prophets to Israel and a certain number of prophets to the nations. And they don't necessarily know, they're like, there's a certain number, but we don't know their names, but Balaam is one of them.
Showed our neighbors.
Yeah.
They were like, what's wrong with
Oh.
outside?
My wife told me that the neighbors were out front asking what's wrong with outside. Why is it dark?
Google is free.
They should use the emergency message system to tell people that that the sun is going to go dark. Don't be alarmed. It's not the end of the world.
Well, we're in Texas, so you can't expect much.
As someone said in the comments, the dragon ate 90% of the sun and then said, I'm full.
Yeah, I think there might be there are people that believe, especially if flat earthers try and explain things, there is this idea of like a second moon or a second sun, a dark sun.
Is it the disk moon that's invisible half of the time or see-through?
Yeah.
Or
I think it's a sun, and I think it comes from Hindu mythology. It's called
Please shut up.
It's definitely got like a Sanskrit name or something like that.
I've never taken enough drugs.
Second sun. Oh.
Yeah, it's like a dark sun or whatever that goes in front of the sun to make the eclipse happen or something like that.
It's a black hole sun, is it?
It's
Maybe.
yeah. You know what? Maybe what it is. It's very simple. God just, his job is to just spin the dome, and he's getting bored, so he's doing a magic trick. Look at the sun. Look at the sun. It's right here. Oh, look at that.
I don't remember what it's called, but
Yeah,
I'll continue. So verse 9, verse 9. God said to Balaam, came to Balaam. Licht writes that God came to him in a dream and notes that Elohim, not Yehovah, appears before Gentiles, like Avimelech in Genesis 23 and Lavan in 31:24. He writes that scripture perhaps uses the word Elohim as a modest critique against Balaam's claim that he was a prophet of Yehovah. Ashley notes that Elohim is cognate with the Ilahin, gods that come to Balaam in combination 1, line 1 of the Deir Allah text. Right, so in the Deir Allah text it uses the word gods, Ilahin, the plural of Ilah or El. Yeah, so that's interesting. Who are these men with you? Levine comments, the emissaries are called the men here, and in Numbers 22:20, the same term is used in identifying Moses' emissaries to Canaan in Numbers 13:2 and 13:2 and 3:16. As there, the implication here is that the emissaries were important personages. the author of the tale of the Jenny appropriates this diction in Numbers 22:35, thereby linking his fable to the preceding narrative.
That's the donkey story. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Right, Jenny as
female.
in a female donkey.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah. That's interesting.
I didn't know what that term meant. I was reading Levine's thing. I was like, Penny, why is he using that word? And then I had
Yeah,
to
tale
look that
of
up.
the Jenny, yeah.
Yeah.
Jenny,
you-
And I had no
yeah,
idea
so-
that was that was the word that was used for it.
Yeah, and a male donkey is called a jack or something else. Something like that.
I got no clue.
A jackass. A jackass is a male donkey.
Okay.
Um,
Also, it seems like we're the
uh,
only ones carrying the show. You guys wanna party it up?
Oh,
we're
oh,
back.
what happened? What happened?
somebody joined. Pete don't join.
Oh,
Perfect.
hey, Faytown.
Heathens.
Hey, yeah, you missed the beginning and a very interesting presentation by Lorence about a archaeological find that shows that Balaam is mentioned in other places, but with a completely different story, and it's very possible that this story was kind of taken and put into the Bible to kind of make it more interesting, I guess.
Well,
Or the
That's
opposite.
local flavor.
yeah. So
well,
some
one,
local flavor. Yeah, not exactly.
yeah,
make it
that's-
more
yeah,
interesting.
local flavor makes more sense. Yeah.
Well, you guys missed a solar eclipse. That's
I
what
think
was
actually that's
doing.
probably where Aaron is. That's my guess.
Yeah,
I'm guessing
he's
he's.
Yeah, he's probably
listening to
getting
us,
it right
but-
about now.
Yeah,
he's
he
probably-
is.
he mentioned that he could see the one of the things that it does when you have a solar eclipse and you get partial, the actual
Yeah, had to grab
shadows-
some video.
Yeah, the shadows trip out, like
Of course he did.
the trees and the leaves will show like little crescents. It's really
Yeah.
crazy.
It is.
If
It
you
is,
hold-
a,
if
it
you
is a
get a
weird
cl-
thing, and I had to get video of it because when, of course, when the trees move, all the crescents move in a weird way.
Yeah.
You just don't see that every day or every
can-
year.
if you have a colander, like a spaghetti drainer or whatever, you can hold it up, and every hole in the colander, the light that comes out will be the shape of a crescent.
Yeah, it's a really
Little
fun thing.
experiment you can do.
Oh, that sounds like so much fun.
Okay. Can you
Alright.
please continue?
Yeah. The tale of the Jenny. In a conversation initiated by God with humans, the deity proverbially poses rhetorical questions in order to communicate effectively. This narrative device was recognized by the Jewish sages. Thus, God asked Adam where he was hiding in Genesis 3:9, as well as how he learned that he was naked and what he had eaten in Genesis 4:9. So the same as here, where it says, "Who are these men?" It's a rhetorical question, since God obviously knows
Right.
who they are.
Right.
Verse
Of course he
19. Milgram writes that repetition of ritual procedures until a favorable omen is received is well known among the ancient Greeks, Hittites, and pre-Islamic Arabs. He further writes, even in a dream interpretation, a single dream is not decisive, as in the case of Pharaoh in Genesis 41:5. Similarly, in Mesopotamia, Gilgamesh and Gudea
Good day.
must dream the same dream twice. Thus, Balaam can sincerely hope that in his second dream he will learn that the Lord has changed his mind. This basically pagan view is reflected in the Midrash mentioned in Talmud Barachot
Yeah.
7a, that Balaam was privy to the split second when God waxes angry against Israel each day. The difference between Balaam and Israel's prophets contrasts sharply on this matter. Both hope that God will change his mind, but the prophets assume his constancy even while attempting to change his mind, whereas Balaam assumes that God is fickle and he attempts to exploit that by divination. This premise will be categorically denied in this story. The universe is neither mechanical nor predictable. God's will is neither capricious nor determinable.
Oh, look, it's exactly what I was talking about with the old ideas that, the world can't be mechanical because it has to be magic and God has to be sovereign or we're all wrong and we can't be wrong. So, shush.
Okay, so that's there isn't any commentary on verse 20, so we can
No.
go in and talk about
Yes.
the actual talking Jenny.
Yeah. Please finish this chapter.
Cool.
Verse 21.
So Balaam arose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the leaders of Moab. But God was angry because he was going, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. Now he was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, the donkey turned off from the way and went into the field. But Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back onto the way. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path of the vineyards, with a wall on either side and a wall on that side. That's weird. Anyway, right, okay. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pressed herself against the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. The angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn, the right or the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. So Balaam was angry and struck the donkey with his stick. And the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey and said to Balaam, "What have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times?" Then Balaam said to the donkey, "Because you have made a mockery of me. If there had been a sword in my hand, I would have killed you by now." The donkey said
But
to
the
Balaam,
donkey can count. Isn't that
yeah, well, the weird
the
thing about it
donkey
is
can
Balaam's
talk?
not surprised. Balaam's not surprised that his donkey's just suddenly turned
Yeah,
around and started talking to him. He just talks straight back to her.
Yeah.
yeah. I have a comment on this, I think, as well.
Yeah, he said, you didn't tell me you could count. Well, you never asked. Well,
Yeah, you know, it's well in fairy tales. It's not surprising if you talk out of your ass.
Oh, did someone say they had commentary on that, or do you want me to carry on?
Me, but
Keep going.
move on. Yes.
Move on. Okay. The donkey said to Balaam, "I am not your donkey on which you have ridden all of your life to this day. Have I ever been accustomed to
wait a
do
minute.
so
How
That's a
old is this
question.
donkey?
No, it's a question. Like,
It's
I
am
the-
I not your donkey?
and I know, yeah.
Am I not
Yeah,
your
okay.
donkey?
I know what you were thinking, that it was he's saying that I've been your donkey all your life, like since he was born, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that what you meant? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
that sounds like
40-year-old
that.
donkey.
Anyway, right. Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, with his sword drawn in his hand. And he bowed all the way to the ground. The angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come to you out of an adversary, because your way was contrary to me. But the donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, I would have surely have killed you just now and let her live." Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the way against me. Now then, if it is displeasing to you, I will turn back." But the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but you shall speak only a word which I tell you." So Balaam went along with the leaders of Balak. When Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, which is on the Aron border, at the extreme end of the border. Then Balak said to Balaam, "Did I not urgently send you to call you? Why did you not come to me? Am I unable to honor you?" So Balaam said to Balak, "Behold, I have come now to you. Am I able to speak anything at all? The word of God puts in my mouth, that I shall speak." And Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Karith. Thank you. Balak sacrificed ox and sheep and sent some to Balaam and the leaders who were with him. Then it came about in the morning that Balak took Balaam and brought him up to the high places of Baal, and he saw there a portion of the people.
That's the end of the chapter.
End of the chapter.
Okay.
Yeah. You can start a commentary. My commentary, but you read it.
Was there any comments? Or...
I see one.
All right.
Oh yes,
I'll jump
you have
on
3
that one.
comments.
Iconicer says talking donkeys. They should be talking out of their ass by definition. Yes, and what gets me is when God chooses all these prophets, and they all say that whatever they say is just whatever the Lord is telling them to say. Well, I'm not terribly impressed by that because it all sounds like you're making up shit. Joseph Smith, Muhammad, they all making up shit. Send the donkey.
I take that more seriously.
I would.
Yeah.
Let the donkey address a crowd of people from the mount. I'm sure we would all be properly impressed.
I would indeed. I would indeed. Although, oh God, who was in ancient Greece? There was a great skeptic who basically he spent all his time discrediting a cult that essentially did that. They had a snake, a real snake, a live snake, on which they put a mask, and they had like a tube going down, and there was a con man speaking into the thing in the tube so that it appeared to come from the god. And nobody was allowed too close, of course, but you could see that it was a moving snake with a head like a man, and you did hear the talking coming from the snake, which admittedly was more impressive than anything God's actually done. But it was still a con. And yeah, it's what's the intentions you said? I don't know about you, but when you're on the bus and a man says he hears the voice of God, do you move closer or further away from him? Yeah. So prophets are interesting characters.
All right. Verse 22. God was very angry when he went. Even though in verse 20, God tells him to go, God is incensed. Yichad af.
Yichar.
Yichar af. Yeah, that's right. Which is literally like his nose flared or something like that.
Yeah, something like this.
Kind of funny you said
with-
it that way, Isaac. Je gaat af in Dutch means you're going to fail.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I misread the resh as a daled. With
As scribes do.
Yes, that's true. We brought that up before, haven't we?
Yes.
Yeah, so God is incensed with Balaam. Rashi and Rashbam wrote that Balaam was desirous of cursing the Israelites. Licht writes that this contradiction indicates that the author gathered the story's details from various sources and didn't hesitate with the contradictions he made. Yes, possible. I think there is I can't remember who says it. Maybe this is what they were saying, Rashi and Rashbam, right? That he woke up early in the morning and saddled the donkey by himself. He didn't wait for his servants to do it. So he was desirous to go out and curse them. So that's why he was angry. Two servants. Milgram comments, Balak's officials, verse 21, have disappeared. Abraham is accompanied by two servants on a 3-day journey in Genesis 22:3, as is Saul on his day trip to Endor in 1 Samuel 28:8. This mode of travel, the master riding and the servant walking, suggests that Balaam was close by. The theme of two servants is a literary stereotype. Numbers Rabbah 20:13 reads, "This is the proper way, that is, that when a man of eminence goes out on a journey, two people should attend on him."
I do notice that the distinction, it doesn't make a lot of sense in the story that he's, these men have been sent to fetch him, and then he's riding his donkey, and the angel stands in the way, and the donkey dodges by going out into the field and around, or pressing him up against a wall and squishing his foot, but gets not smited by virtue of avoidance. And yet there's no mention of the men he is presumably traveling with getting smited by the angel or any of that nonsense, or having their donkeys, or whatever, any effect whatsoever, or even an observation of this. But he's upset that he's been made a fool of. And then when the angel says, it's okay, you can go like you were told to 5 minutes ago, but only say what I said you could say, or else so help me. And then at that point, he goes back to the men that he was supposed to be traveling with initially. So it's very much, I can see why a lot of scholars went with this is a stitch up job.
Yeah. So help me.
Yeah.
So help me myself. So in the same verse, to oppose him, the Hebrew is la satan lo. The term satan is used for an opponent or an adversary. Levine writes that the primary biblical occurrences of the noun Satan occur in military or political context. Actually writes that it's also the name of a member of the heavenly court. For example, in Job 1-2 and Zechariah 3:1
Yeah,
and
he
1
would have been.
Chronicles 21:1.
Yeah, Satan, the Satan character would have been initially, as the adversary, would have been initially like God's prosecutor, essentially.
Yeah, that's kind of the Jewish opinion.
Which is
of
a
the
job.
character.
You
Yeah.
need that job. Someone to
Yeah.
play devil's advocate.
I think
And that
there
was
is.
the way I understood it when I was a kid. I got so confused. I mean, Satan is obviously working for God. And I mean, when I was a little kid, like 11 or so, I mean, people are telling me that Satan is this evil character, but like, he's not the enemy of God. He's an employee.
He
of
becomes
God.
the that evil character later once we get
Yeah.
to like Revelation and some of the epistles.
Yeah,
Like that's when he becomes this evil character that's
Yeah.
entirely or that,
Yeah.
that
But I
is in
think,
many ways disconnected from God's heavenly
Yeah.
court. So
I think I've mentioned it before. It's like it's still confusing actually in like Christian idea because you've got like Satan as this bad guy opposed to God, but then he's also punishing you in hell for the sins you do. Like, why would he do that if he's the bad guy? But
It's the
Yeah.
logic.
Christians
of
disagree on
synopsis.
yeah, it's a common conception that Satan rules hell and will be damning
Yeah.
our souls there and all that. But then there's
it's
the more
God.
fundamentalist Christians will say that Satan isn't in hell. So hell is operated by Jesus.
right, no, that
or-
is the more common idea that like it's still God ruling in hell.
Well,
The thing
it's
is, did
God
God
set it up.
create the angels?
yes. Well, apparently.
Right. So then he created Lucifer to be the way he. I mean, I got the, when I was brought up young, Satan was like this most evil thing. That's what I was indoctrinated into believing. Nothing to do with an employee of God, no understanding of the Bible within it. Just told this stuff, until you believed that Satan was this most evilest thing ever. Like, but the thing is, however evil Satan is that Christians believe, that they have to remember is that he only has that ability because God gave it to him. God created the evil. It's like if you create a robot and make it be able to do evil actions like slaughter loads of people and stuff like that, does that make you evil? Because you made it to be able to do that, and it did it.
To
Do
play,
you understand?
Isaiah
Yeah,
45,
totally.
5, 6, and 7, where God takes full credit for creating evil.
and
He
darkness.
does all good, he does all evil, and there is none else.
And
He does
and
all
Revelation
everything.
Revelation 14:10 is where it says that those in hell will be tormented in the presence of the angels and the Lamb, as in Jesus
To
Christ.
play the actual devil's advocate for once, the argument in Christianity, and again, this has to do with somewhat nebulous concepts of free will, is that Satan was made very great, an archangel on a parallel with Michael or Gabriel, that level, and therefore his fall was all the greater. Men of genius make the worst tyrants because they can do it well. It is not out of bad mice or bad roaches you make demons, but out of bad archangels. So the idea being God makes the great potential, and then we are responsible for what we do with it. That, again, you could work with if God wasn't supposed to be totally omniscient and know all the ways things were going to go wrong. And then you just have to allow that he wanted things to go wrong or what have you. And I mean, the concept of the
Let's not forget that angels, the difference between angels and people is that humans have free will and angels do not. But Lucifer was an angel who exercised his free will. And so we have yet another contradiction.
I just
and
wanted
far later.
Early versions of hell had Satan being punished in hell. Milton's Paradise Lost. He's cast down to hell and bound in adamantine chains, and but for divine grace he never could have lifted his head, but then of course he does and gets all his people together and goes to fuck with Adam, because
but then he melted down the adamantium chains and used it to build a skeleton for Wolverine.
I mean, I would have made a crown with it, but that's just me.
I just want
Yeah.
I just put this comment
continue.
just to make it known. But this doesn't refer to Satan himself. It's just like he was an adversary to Balaam. So
Yes,
just,
it's the
Right.
same, but it shows that the word means adversary and not.
Yes.
not-
And before this
Yeah.
comment gets too old, Balthazar 228 offers 4.99 and says, when you have donkeys talk to the people to convey your dogma, that's literally talking out of your ass. Yes. Where
They'd still be more
otherwise,
sensible
when you
than
have
this
people
prophet.
doing it, it's only figuratively talking out of your ass. Then Rachel Light says, to me, it sounds like Satan is like the Greeks' Hades with similar attributes. Yeah, it's like the Bible, the Christian tradition. The Christians believe a lot of stuff that's not in the Bible. We've talked a couple of times about different things that are not in the Bible that Christians believe in. The idea that Satan runs hell is one of those. But then a lot of where we get the hell concept certainly isn't in the Hebrew Bible at all. But a lot of it came from like Dante's Inferno and similar works.
Yeah,
Where you get a
Dante's
traditional
Inferno came
belief.
from the Apocalypse of Peter, didn't it?
yes,
Largely?
the Apocalypse of Peter. Yep, that was
Yeah.
the main work
Yeah,
about the concept of hell. Yeah.
It was basically rewriting the Apocalypse of Peter to say "fuck the Pope," which Tim Minchin did more succinctly, but good for Dante.
when is that book from, the source material?
Oh, the Apostle of Peter. That was
Yeah.
oh my god, was that the 2nd century?
It would have had to have been
Maybe
the
the
2nd
third?
century because
Second or
it
third, I
was
forget.
it was written in the name of Peter, as Bart Ehrman is so fond of pointing out. There was something of a cottage industry of writing things in the name of Peter. However, it was never put in although it was very I guess you could say influential in certain scholarly circles. It was never, to my knowledge, added to any canon version of the Bible any more than the Acts of Peter, which was also like Jesus' cross is following him out of the tomb in the morning, and it's all it's too magic even for even for the early church, which is saying something. So
Yeah,
okay, so
Dante's Inferno is the later work, but it was also the more popular.
oh yeah.
So thank you, Lawrence. I could not remember what the other thing was. So
the Apocalypse of Peter influenced Dante, and the Acts of Peter influenced Disney. Is that what you're saying?
Well, in the Acts of Peter, when Paul's head is cut off, milk instead of water spurts from his body, and a miracle, and his
Instead
head
of water.
bounces 3 times, which causes the 3 magical springs of that area, which incidentally already existed and had local mythology around them. But who cares? Magic
and
shit
that
is
scene
magic.
was replayed in the movie Alien 1979.
I don't remember milk. I just remember screaming.
Yeah, when the guy who later played Bilbo, he's playing a robot, but when he gets his head knocked off, milk shoots out instead of blood.
Okay, I feel like we're diverging from the subject.
Yeah.
I think
All right, I'll
Right,
continue.
we're just
You
trying to
feel
have
like
fun.
Verse 23, the donkey saw the angel of the Lord. Rashi comments that God granted an animal greater perception than a man, who, because of his intelligence, would become deranged from the perception of destructive spirits. Yeah, this is a common idea that animals can see demons and angels more readily than humans. That's because they wouldn't mind them. They would just be like, oh, it's just normal.
That's Joe. It's Joe. We share milk every other Tuesday and gossip.
Verse 28. The Lord opened the donkey's mouth. Several rabbis reduced the miraculous nature of this event. As Milgram explains, Maimonides, the rationalist, understood the entire scene to be a prophetic vision. Earlier, the rabbis tried to reduce the miraculous element by declaring that the speaking ass was ordained by God on the eve of the first Sabbath, that is, as part of creation, and therefore did not constitute an interruption of the natural order. Yeah, I think we've mentioned this before, that God created certain things before the world, like a pair of pliers, because you can't make pliers without pliers, apparently.
So it's like when a programmer puts a backdoor code in so he can go fuck around in the background.
Yeah, because there's this sort of idea. I think they had this idea that God doesn't do miracles for like silly reasons. So something like this, it wouldn't make sense to make a miracle to disrupt the nature. So it had to be something that was like pre-made. Yeah, it's interesting. Although, yeah, and there's also the idea that it was all a vision, which can make sense because, you know, Balaam sees God in visions and while he's sleeping. So
I wonder how many men have made a career out of preserving the dignity of the God of the Bible via intellectual contortions.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So all the church fathers,
Yeah.
all the rabbinical authors.
Mhm.
Man, there's so many. Oh boy.
But basically, any priest or pastor with a scholarly bent, all the apologists, preachers, all the Reformation fathers,
But I
minor
thought
and
the Bible
major.
was written by God.
Well, God's a bit of a dumbass, so
Yeah,
we have to
funnily
cover
enough-
for him.
Funnily enough, on that there
He's
was
not a dumbass. He's a talking ass.
You can be a talking dumbass.
Who can count?
there was
At least to 3.
there was a monograph that was recently written. So the word that is used for I forget which verse in the New Testament it's in, but it's so it means God breathed. That scripture is God breathed, right? So they're like, oh, this is inspired by God. You know, that was kind of the long-standing interpretation of that verse and that word specifically. But there was a recent monograph that came out where I forget his name, but he argued essentially that God breathed means life-giving, because he talks about the inclusion of Adam being made alive with God's breath.
Living
So
soul.
instead of the scripture being a God inspired inspired by God, essentially he argues that it means that it's supposed to give life. So which was I'll see if I can find the book. I'll post it.
Yeah, and I've
inspired.
heard pastors claim that it is a living book imbued with the Spirit, which of course is an excellent way to permit any interpretation of whatever text you want without actually having to reference things like history or fact or sources, because the Holy Spirit told you. But even Christians recognize that this can go too far, which is why we tell the joke of the woman who would open her Bible and divine by putting her finger on it, and who for her morning studies one morning flipped it open and pointed, and Judas went and hanged himself, and she thought that couldn't be the whole message, so she flipped again and stuck her finger down and it said, go and do thou likewise. So
I think the whole thing about all of this is that actually when I was a Christian, I never really thought about it deeply, the whole God inspired bit. The thing is, when something inspires somebody to do something, that inspiration, that's great at the start and all of that, but whatever that person goes on to do doesn't necessarily, might not reflect what was inspired in the first place. So, I never really thought deeply about that as a Christian. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Totally, absolutely.
Yeah,
And I think
so it's like the big question is like, as a Christian, you've got to ask yourself, it's like, what do you mean by inspired by God?
And that's absolutely an excellent question, because the word inspiration applied to the Bible is used like a thought-stopping, intellectually dishonest wild card, much the way objective morality is used now. And inspiration was a bit of an older one, and Colonel Ingersoll called it out quite specifically when he said I would ask pastors, do you believe the Bible to be inspired in any way in which Shakespeare was not inspired? Because, as he pointed out, the truth does not need to be inspired. A fact will fit every other fact in the universe. A lie will only fit a lie that has been told and contrived in order to fit it. And eventually, the next lie will not fit with the next fact, and there is an opportunity for inspiration.
That's beautifully put. I love the way you said that. I wish I had read that myself, and I haven't. In the same way, we could say that Rocket Raccoon was inspired by the island of Dr. Moreau. And there's virtually no facts in common there. It's just somebody read that book, the original book, and then decided to make a comic book character out of it.
Mm-hmm. And
actually,
I still maintain God should have waited for Shakespeare if he was going to write a damn book.
yeah, I mean, I haven't. I mean, Isaac haven't finished his commentary. So, yeah, I know.
Yes, it's not an episode if you don't say it.
I love that Tomer's like, no, I can't say the catchphrase.
Yeah.
You know, we do this in part to induce you to say that once every episode because it's not
Of
a true
course.
Blasphemers Bible study if you don't.
Of course.
We love you.
All right. Yeah. So I was in the middle of 28 about the donkey's mouth. Yeah. So we had Milgram explains that the rationalist tries saying it was a vision, or that God created it in advance. But Ibn Ezra and Sforno, however, wrote that the donkey did speak. Origen, in Homilies on Luke 14:9, writes that he marvels at Balaam's donkey and heaps blessing on it, since it saw the angel of God and had its mouth opened by God. Levine writes, when God opens the Jenny's mouth, she can speak, which is to say that although the Jenny had always possessed a mouth, she did not possess the power of speech until God endowed her with it. The verb pe taf chet thus has an enhanced connotation, that of enabling speech. So normally that means like open, to open. Speech comes naturally to humans, but not, of course, to animals, who are given this exceptional faculty in fables. The ability of humans and animals to converse with each other is also fabulous. Verse 29. Balaam answered the...
disagrees.
29. Balaam, I think horse whisperers are fabulous. 29. Balaam answered the donkey. Ashley comments, what is most surprising is the seemingly calm way Balaam answers the question asked by his now talkative donkey. The reader must enter into the world of the story at this moment. The narrator is not concerned to have Balaam question the possibility of the donkey speaking, but rather to report a rational conversation between the only two non-heavenly characters in the story. The only other biblical example of a talking animal, the serpent in Genesis 3, also brings forth no astonishment from the human partner, only rational dialogue.
In fairness, she lived alone, naked in a garden with one man who knew nothing about the world. So her lack of astonishment is a little more understandable.
Yeah. Is this the only commentary?
Well, then there's also
Ashley?
the dragon. There's the dragon standing on the beach in Revelations.
I have never taken enough drugs to understand Revelations.
But I think it leads credence to the idea that it's a vision. If it was a vision,
I know.
If it was a vision and Balaam was, used to seeing strange things in dreams and talking to God or whatever, then it would make sense that he'd be like, oh, okay, this is just another one of these dreams I always have.
Yeah. Certain cultures treat people with mental disorders, schizophrenia, the actual seeing of non-existent persons as spiritual leaders, and that as some reality that they are privy to that the rest of us are not.
So what you're saying is that the real Balaam, son of Beor or whatever from Pesa, was just a schizophrenic, and he was used to seeing talking animals in the road.
No, not necessarily him.
I spent 2 years working as a mental health recovery worker, working with people with paranoid schizophrenia, and when you actually work closely with these people, they really believe. Some of them, I've seen a person rolling around on the floor because he believed he was on fire, and another one dropped spiders.
And I've seen a man talking to an angel while he played the piano, who I assure you was not there. So that's not to say that was Balaam specifically, but I guarantee that some prophets throughout history have absolutely been schizophrenic people talking to their delusions.
We also have to
Another thing, just to add to that, people with paranoid schizophrenia, quite a lot of them have I don't know if you'd call it a God complex. Quite a few of them believe they're descended from Jesus and so on, things like that. And they're some, not all of them, but quite a lot of them have this kind of, they feel like they're high and mighty, if you know what I mean, like rock star kind of personality.
They're
kind
special
of
and destined for a great.
Exactly. Sorry, carry on.
There is this
I
thing.
also have to throw out, Matt, that that your bias, your bias, or your assumption of our bias, that we are biased to accept the real Balaam is the one that's indicated by independent historical records, as opposed to your assumption that the biblical Balaam is fake because it's more recent and based on an obvious alteration of these original records that led to the Bible.
Don't you know that the later written is always the original, Aaron?
All right. I got
We
one
call
more,
it
I
a
think.
prequel.
Okay, one more for this chapter. Verse 32. Your path is a reckless one before me. Hebrew ki yorat haderech lenegdi. The exact meaning is not clear. Septuagint, Samaritan text, and Vulgate render your manner instead of your path. Reading darkecha, your way, your manner. Levine says, for the mission was pressing upon me. Oh, okay, yeah, that
He
can
renders
kind of
it
be
like
that's a translation.
Yeah.
The mission, the way, was pressing upon me. Okay. Milgram says, for the errand is obnoxious to me. Ashley says, your way was evil. BDB dictionary reads your rat as precipitate, and thus your way is precipitate before me. Huh?
I think I read this. I wrote it wrong. Precipitate. I don't know.
Precipitate means to rain.
No, there's an older usage of the term. I'm trying to think of how to define it correctly.
Yeah, the way it reads, the way is precipitate before me.
Acting suddenly or without careful considerations. Right, your way is.
That's the one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. Lovely.
Yeah, that's how they rendered it as well. So it's not my fault.
No, it's an old word
usage.
in that context, and that usage is very old, and it's not found in any modern texts. But I don't read a lot of modern texts, so
No, I think the normal is I guess it's the normal technical usage to cause to happen suddenly, and then in chemistry took it from that. Yeah.
All right, is that the full commentary then?
Yes.
That's first. Yeah, that's okay. Chapter 22.
All right, I have a couple. I have a full day today. We've only got 30 minutes left. We won't be able to jump into the next chapter. For those who know something about my background with this ridiculous dog, he's found another hole in the fence, and I have to go fix that before I can let the dog out. Yeah, he's gotten out so many times this last week through different means that I'm spend like it seems like I spend half my time fixing the damn fence from the new weaknesses that he's made in it.
In all fairness, Arn, it might be my fault because he's the only one who isn't in the end credits.
Obviously he feels shunned. But I'm sorry that we weren't able to get through all 3 chapters, Lawrence. I guess we get to save the blessings for Tuesday.
Yeah, I suppose. But that's fine. I was
Oh shoot, I'm gonna miss Tuesday. Darn.
Oh damn. So I was just happy to be able to discuss the Balaam pericope in general and kind of the scholarship behind it.
That was wonderful.
That was a very good presentation, and when you post that on your channel, I will share it on social media.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Hasta luego.
All right, so Numbers 23 on Tuesday, and we will be doing the Book of Mormon tomorrow as well. I just haven't created the link for it yet, but I will get on that as soon as I can. But like I said, I've got a very full day today, back to back to back. So, as always, thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.